this time. Nigeria's average daily crude oil production rose marginally to 1.27 million barrels per day in June. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Country disclosed these figures. Yes, this is according to data from direct communications with Nigerian authorities, which marks a rise of 25,000 barrels per day from 1.25 million barrels per day recorded in May. Meanwhile, the secondary sources placed Nigeria's daily average crude in June to 1.362 million barrels per day, a decrease of 10,000 barrels compared to May figures. That's 372 million barrels per day. Despite the decline in production, according to secondary sources, Nigeria had maintained its status as Africa's largest oil producer, followed by Libya, who closed at 1.2 million barrels per day in June. Looking at this, or let's look more at this and other issues making headlines around the crude oil market and the entire energy space. Joining me this Friday afternoon to start this conversation is a partner, Zera Advisory Consulting, a former chairperson of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, Mr. Joseph Nwakwue. It's good to have you, Mr. Nwakwue, on the show. It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Tolu.
Let's start with this increase in output that we see. I don't think this is where we should be, but what do you make of 25,000 barrels added to what we're doing, producing at the moment? What is your reaction to this?
Well, not much of a reaction. I think there's work to be done. Our developed capacity is probably 2 million barrels. So we just need to do the work necessary to restore all that short in volume. So I'm not excited at a 25,000 barrel increase. That's way below our capacity.
Way below our capacity. What can we do to get better, to improve this? We've been talking about crude oil theft for some time, and we see the NNPC, we see the Ministry of Petroleum, we see even the NSA, DSS. Everyone is getting involved in this. What do you make of our moves trying to address this challenge?
Well, I wish we had a lot more capacity to deal with those challenges. You're speaking specifically to the issue of insecurity, right?
Yes.
So yes. So it shouldn't be there if our security forces were hadn't good enough capacity. So I think the state needs to ramp up and ensure that people can do business without any hindrance. So it's a role that the Nigerian state needs to carry out. The industry is business. The industry's primary business is to produce oil and gas. They're not security companies.
Now, if we are to look at what's been happening, I'm sure you're aware of this back and forth with regards to crude oil supply to local refining. You are a professional in this industry and you understand better. I'm a journalist. Mine is to ask the questions. What really is the position with regards to the PIA in the distribution of crude and all of that? Can you make us understand this?
Okay, in the PIA, we made provision for what we call domestic crude supply obligation, just like we had for gas before the PIA. So what that means is that a proportion of production from the companies, the upstream companies, will need to be dedicated to the domestic market to feed our refineries, our domestic refineries. So what that and we went ahead, I think it's section 109 of the PIA, went ahead to specify, it says, well, it has to be on commercially negotiated basis. So it's not an expropriation. You don't just say, oh, you produce 10,000, I'm taking 2,000 to the market. No, it has to be negotiated. And he said it has to be on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. So what that presupposes is that if you're a refiner, you need to approach an upstream player, a producer, and negotiate the basis for supply to your refinery. That's what the law expects.
So for
the regulator has a role. And indeed, the two regulators have a role in ensuring that that process is seamless. The Commission has a responsibility to come up with regulations guiding that process, that engagement.
So with what the regulation has done now, saying that the refiners should furnish a supply of cargo prices, effective monitoring and regulation, that's what the Commission intends to achieve. So that is the way to go. But before now, the Commission had not come up with this until this local refining issue came up there. What's your assessment of even the role of the regulator in its entirety since we started the implementation of the PIA?
Okay, you've asked too many questions in one, I guess. I heard about that, but that's a pronouncement. Regulations are not done by pronouncement. So I expect that they will go ahead and produce a regulation, a documentation, and walk it through the process of rulemaking, right? And get it approved. And it becomes part of our body of laws. Just pronouncing that this is what you expect, this is what you want. Yeah, they may have all sat down and agreed that that's the right process to follow. But you need to give it the force of law. You need to write up a regulation to do that.
So in all of this, I am worried because many would talk about the implementation of the PIA, which one of these is the removal of subsidy and all of that. But at the moment, another argument from analysts and experts like you is that at the moment, PMS should be selling for as much as $1. And if it's to sell for as much as $1, and we are still buying at 600, 500 and something, as the case may be, there's a sort of intervention coming in somewhere. So how does this affect the proper implementation of the PIA? That's what is confusing here.
Yeah, I mean, Section 205 of the PIA talks about competitive pricing for petroleum products, right? So that is the legal regime for pricing of products. However, the implementation of the PIA has been dogged with a lot of challenges. They haven't moved as fast. I can say that clearly that we haven't implemented the PIA faithfully. I think it's important that that message is clearly spelled out. For someone who was involved in putting it together, I just feel disappointed that it's not been implemented the way we had thought it would be implemented. So having said that, we need to separate pricing. You see, a market exists. The pricing is an outcome of other forces in the market, right? So when we focus on pricing, we lose the plot. I remember on your show, I think, I had said that there were things that should have preceded the deregulation of pricing. And some of those things were not quite followed through. We needed to diversify the supply. Before you say that you're removing your hands from pricing, you needed to have sufficient enough supply from varying sources so that there will be competition, right? So if we say that we've deregulated the market and we still have a single or at best two suppliers, a duopoly, then you need to then regulate that price because it becomes a monopolistic market. By definition, you cannot remove your hand if there's only one supplier who fixes prices. So the regulator needs to now get involved in price fixing, which is what we're trying to get away from. So we needed to have done the work prior to that pronouncement that we are taking our hands off pricing. So, and that's why we're stuck. Essentially, we got stuck because we didn't do what we were supposed to. The market needed to be sufficiently diversified before you talk about taking your hands off price.
So the market didn't get fully diversified before that move was made. But now I still like to ask you this question. Now that there is this back and forth, it's like the international oil companies are also trying to protect their own interests one way or the other. I don't want to open up the market. for maybe one player to run the market. But we've talked so much about the 650,000 capacity refinery, Dangote, and many talked about the positive this holds for Nigeria. As it is, at the moment, we hear that 5 million barrels of crude will be gotten from the United States to run this same facility. What do you think about the final output when this refinery starts to churn out PMS? What impact will it really have on the market, considering the challenges and all that is on ground at the moment?
Okay, I'll start by saying that it's a very good development. It's long overdue. I pray that we see PMS from the Dangote as soon as possible. Now, what impact would that have? At the minimum, it helps to diversify supply, right? It introduces one more player in the supply side of the equation. So that's a good thing in itself. How that plays out with pricing is slightly a different issue, and it's something that one can take a look at. But, I will say a few things. One, we need to recognize that this facility is in an export zone. So it is, by definition, not necessarily a domestic refinery. That's something I just thought people need to be to be aware of. Yeah. So the other thing is that he is a businessman. He's going to source product wherever he can find products. You see, his primary objective is to maximize his refining margin. Let's all understand. So he's not some Red Cross, right? A businessman, he has borrowed extensively to build this facility. So he's going to maximize refining margin. That's what it's about. That's the only way he can service his obligations to his financiers, right? So it then means that he will take crude from wherever he can find it at a good price, because his margin is related to quality of the crude and the price at which he gets it. So if he does those two, it could jolly well be that it is not in his interest then to take Nigerian crude, because Nigerian crude is high value, right? He's got a very complex high-tech refinery that can take very poor crude and turn it into useful products and still, maintain a good margin. So if, again, it's a decision he has to make, right, where he sources his product, because his primary objective, I keep saying, is to maximize his refining margin. And that refining margin is a function of quality of the crude. His refinery already has what we call a Nielsen complexity index, which is, I think it's 10.5 or something like that. So it means he can pretty much take very low quality crude, which is cheap, refine it and make better margins, right? So the whole noise about whether he takes from Nigeria or imports, let's stay back a bit and think about if he can get today. Brent is $86. If he can get product, WTI is 83 plus, so there's a $4 difference already. If he can get something at $80 from somewhere, from Brazil or wherever, and he can refine it and still make the same profit margin that he will make, well, why won't he go there and get it? I don't know if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So all he needs to worry about is net out his freight cost and insurance, of course, and see what makes him more money. So that's my take on that. It's not, and if he gets crude from here at a good price, why not? But like I said, the regime says that he needs to negotiate with the producers. So if he negotiates, why will he produce? The producers are economic parties as well. Are they going to sell to him at a lower price when they can get more internationally just because he's in Nigeria? Is that what you expect them to do? Are they going to subsidize him because he's in Nigeria? So this my point is, everybody, the upstream producers, they would like to sell at whatever price they can get, the best price they can get. That's what. Remember, most of them already have running contracts, so most of those volumes have been pre-committed. So those will need to be, they need to get off those commitments before they can supply anyone else. The other big elephant in the room is that our output has dropped substantially to the level where we can barely service the refinery. Even if we decided, by some this to force everybody to, we're not producing enough. So there's even not enough to go to anybody, because Nigeria still has to export a certain volume because we borrowed against those volumes, right? We already have base. That's what they call it locally. We've mortgaged some volumes. So those volumes are not available to give to anybody. And we're about mortgaging a few more. So when we do that, it reduces the volume of crude that is available for you to give to anybody, including, and not just that, with any other local refiner, right? So we need to ramp up production. If we were doing 2 million barrels of oil today, we would have enough to give you, I think. But the question then is, at what price? Is he going to get it at a huge discount, or is he going to get it normally at whatever price? So it's all about, again, negotiation. He needs to sit down with them and negotiate at what price they can deliver to him.
All right. Now, finally, before I let you go, with all of these challenges, what now will be the outlook? It's always good to at least project forward, because we thought that Dangote Refinery coming on stream, many thought that was the silver bullet, but it's looking like that's not going to end all of this crisis. So what do you think? What's the outlook for the industry?
Okay, the outlook is this. I'm glad that a few more players are coming in. So okay. I hear who is building. There are a lot of marginal field people who in a few years' time will start refining PMS. So we need to show up the supply side. Okay, and then at the back of that, we need to let go of pricing. I've always told you that, unfortunately, we had to take the pricing decision, not because we were working with a plan, but simply because we couldn't afford it anymore, right? And now we found out that didn't work either. So I think we need to show up the supplies and make sure that there's sufficient enough supply. And then, of course, get our hands off price fixing. And that will attract the investment. You notice the cues and what we're hearing about weather, flooding, what does that tell you? It tells you that our current distribution infrastructure is too fragile and at best not suited for a country this size. So a lot of investment is required to diversify that net infrastructure as well, and build more robust systems that will withstand whatever is thrown at it. That's not happening today because margins have thinned out so much and there's very little reinvestment going into those infrastructure, whether it's in the midstream or in the downstream. So we need to get our hands off prices. But before we do that, we need to diversify supply. And so that's kind of how I see it. I think going forward, if we stay apart and do the right things, we will have queues will be a thing of the past, because ultimately the infrastructure can take whatever it. Right now, the infrastructure is more marine based, right? So if anything happens out there, we get thrown into this. Oh, something happens, the ships can't offload and something. It just sad. So our distribution infrastructure is very, very weak. So, and it takes 2 weeks. So when one little thing happens to it, and it takes about 2 weeks to clear it. So those are issues that need to be addressed. But you cannot address them if money is not coming in. And for money to come in, you need to get your hands off the pricing in the sector. And to get that to happen, you need to liberalize and diversify supply. So that's kind of the part I see. I
must thank you so much for your time, partner Zera. Advisory and Consulting there, Mr. Joseph Nwakwue. Thank you. Do enjoy your weekend.
Have a nice weekend, Tolu.
Yeah.
Bye.